Большое спасибо, Господин President.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Your Excellencies, distinguished members of the Council, Your Excellency, Ambassador Idris, Permanent Observer of the African Union to the United Nations, and dear brother, Assistant Secretary General Martha Pobi, and dear sister, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor for me and my colleagues to join you today in this august body. Few regions need your invaluable leadership and support as much as Africa. I am therefore grateful to you, Mr. President of the Security Council for October, and to all members of the Security Council for convening this important meeting on the agenda item entitled Cooperation between the United Nations and regional organizations, including the African Union, on which the Secretary General has submitted to this Council his report on strengthening the partnership between the United Nations and the African Union on issues of peace and security in Africa, including the work of the United Nations Office to the African Union. The 10th Informal Joint Seminar and 19th Annual Joint Consultative Meeting between members of the Security Council and the AU Peace and Security Council, to be held next week in Addis Ababa, underscores the strategic and deepening nature of the UN-AU partnership, both reaffirming and amplifying this Council's primary responsibility for global peace and security. Excellencies, the report provides a comprehensive overview of the key achievements, milestones, and challenges in the partnership between the United Nations and the African Union in the area of peace and security in Africa during the reporting period. As the Secretary General has accurately stated, the United Nations and the African Union have developed a unique partnership rooted in the principles of complementarity, respect, and African ownership, a partnership that has become a cornerstone of multilateralism. This report outlines the opportunities for deepening of the strategic partnership with the African Union within the context of more complex and interconnected threats to peace and security on the continent, and also provides an update on the activities of the United Nations Office to the African Union since the issuance of the last report on 26 August 2024. Excellencies, Africa is a continent of incredible promise and opportunities. Its population is youthful, energetic, innovative, and brimming with hope and immense untapped potential. As stated in the report of the Secretary General, in the last year, free, fair, and credible elections have been conducted in several countries, in particular with the peaceful transition of power from one political party to another in Botswana, Ghana, Mauritius, and Senegal, and more recently in Malawi, where the new president was inaugurated last weekend. Also worth noting is the peaceful political transition in Gabon. African Union election observation missions have noted positive developments, including a visible increase in the participation of women and the youth as voters, election officials, and party agents. And we witness greater efficiency in many national electoral management bodies. On the economic front, Africa continues to demonstrate commendable resilience, driven by youthful population, abundant natural resources, expanding consumer markets, and the transformative opportunities to accelerate trade-led integration and drive inclusive, sustainable development through the African Continental Free Trade Area. Yet, these overall positive and recognized trends despite these overall positive and recognized trends, concerns remain in some parts of the continent about the number and complexity of conflicts, often worsened by inter alia, weak or ineffective state authority, violence, extremism, conducive to terrorist activities, the inequitable management of natural resources, organized crime, the impact of climate change, acute food insecurity, and in some cases, denial of fundamental human rights. In the Horn of Africa, we continue to witness multifaceted and interlocking conflict drivers, including stalled and faltering political transitions, territorial disputes, climate-induced insecurity, and ever-worsening humanitarian crisis. The ongoing conflict in Sudan stands out as the largest humanitarian and forced displacement crisis worldwide. We, therefore, welcome the renewed impetus in the diplomatic efforts in recent weeks to end the deadly and destabilizing conflict in Sudan. The spillover effects of this conflict are significantly impacting peace and security in the region. In this regard, the precarious situation in South Sudan calls for urgent action at the highest levels to ensure that the end of the transition as envisaged in the revitalized agreement remains on track. In the Great Lake region, prospects for peace and stability remain elusive, notwithstanding the mediation efforts by the African Union building upon the East African Community and the Southern African Development Community peace initiatives, among others. Recent confrontations between the forces of the government of the Democratic Republic of the Congo and AFC M23 are testing the commitment of the parties to the Washington Agreement signed on 27 June between the DRC and Rwanda, as well as the ongoing follow-through of the Doha Declaration of Principles, signed in July 2025 between the DRC and the AFC M23 movement, under the facilitation of the State of Qatar. In the Sahel region, the situation demands our continued and focused attention. Firstly, to address the serious threats of terrorism and mitigate climate-exacerbated conflicts, which have increased displacement and deepened humanitarian crisis. Secondly, there is a need for effective collective support to the transition processes in the region. In that regard, we commend the various initiatives of the African Union and ECOWAS to re-engage with the concerned countries. Ultimately, as the Secretary General and others leaders have stressed, no military solution whatsoever can resolve underlying causes of conflict in the DRC, in Sudan, or elsewhere in Africa. I call upon this Council to continue to leverage its influence towards peaceful settlement of outstanding issues between the parties. More broadly, Mr. President, in its new agenda for peace, the Secretary General advocates that prevention should start at home, including by establishing dedicated conflict prevention mechanisms and peace-building processes that promotes national cohesion and the search for durable political solutions through inclusive dialogue. This is particularly relevant in contexts where institutions building and the rule of law are still in the making, and where deeply entrenched identities can be easily weaponized. I commend the AU for prioritizing prevention efforts through its robust tools, which can be more effective with the right political will.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, while Fully recognizing that climate change is not a direct cause of conflict, in the Addis Ababa Declaration on Climate Change and the call to action adopted at the Second African Climate Summit held last month, African leaders explicitly identified climate change as a conflict risk multiplier with destabilizing effects across the continent. It is in this context that they are finalizing their consultations with a view to adopting a common African position on climate, peace and security. It is equally important to highlight the great promise of the partnership between the United Nations and the African Union in advancing the implementation of Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security on this 25th anniversary. The United Nations has notably supported the African Union in deploying high-level advocacy missions to Namibia, Malawi and Tanzania in order to observe women's participation in electoral processes and to strengthen their role in peace efforts in Eastern DRC and in the Great Lakes region. During the period covered by the report, I have continued to emphasize the urgency of addressing the situation of women and girls in conflict-affected regions, particularly in Eastern DRC and Sudan, where gender-based and conflict-related sexual violence remain endemic. Excellencies, the peace and security challenges that we face in Africa require proactive conflict prevention. In this regard, security sector reform and governance remain a key element of the UNOAU partnership, particularly in addressing the root causes of conflict and in consolidating peace. The efforts of the AU Peace and Security Council to promote SSR and governance as an essential tool for conflict prevention deserve our full support. Similarly, disarmament, demobilization and reintegration programs will remain indispensable, as we are currently witnessing in the Central African Republic. As for the UNOAU partnership in peace operations, the United Nations there continues also to work closely with the African Union, regional economic communities and regional mechanisms in order to support peace support and peacekeeping operations, including the African Standby Force. This includes sound planning and effective management of AU peace support operations, while fully respecting international human rights law and international humanitarian law in accordance with applicable standards on conduct and discipline with the respective mandates of our institutions. The United Nations and the African Union will also continue their collaboration within the 4 pillars of the UNOAU Joint Framework Roadmap, thereby strengthening their operational readiness for the implementation of Security Council Resolution 2719. And my colleague Marta will be telling you about that. Excellencies, as the Secretary-General stated at the African Union Summit in February, the partnership between the African Union and the United Nations has never been stronger. This collaboration is founded on the shared values and aspirations of our 2 organizations. It is based on the recognition that the challenges facing Africa require coordinated and concerted efforts from both organizations in order to be effectively addressed. This is achieved notably through the annual conference and other frequent meetings throughout the year between the Secretary-General and the Chairperson of the AU Commission, as well as the high-level strategic dialogues co-chaired by the Deputy Chairperson of the Commission and the UN Deputy Secretary-General, but also through meetings of the UNOAU Joint Task Force on Peace and Security at the level of Commissioners and Assistant Secretaries General, the 25th and latest of which took place last month here in New York. Cooperation between the Security Council and the AU Peace and Security Council thus constitutes an essential pillar of this partnership, and I would like to take this opportunity to commend both councils for the steady progress made in strengthening their cooperation. I am convinced President, that your upcoming visit to Addis Ababa will offer a new opportunity to agree on the priority areas of your partnership. I particularly wish to acknowledge the essential coordinating role of the 3 African members of the Security Council, the A3, who provide a vital link between the 2 councils. Excellencies, in conclusion, I wish to reaffirm what the Secretary-General has continuously emphasized throughout his tenure, namely that the strong and lasting partnership between the United Nations and the African Union, as well as with other regional organizations, forms the cornerstone of effective networked multilateralism, which is essential to addressing the complex, evolving, and interconnected threats facing peace, security, development, and human rights today, particularly in Africa. Finally, I wish to take this opportunity to pay tribute to the leadership of the African Union Commission, in particular Chairperson Mohamed Ali Yusuf and Commissioner Bankole Adoye, for their strong and unwavering commitment to the UN-AU partnership